is 7:09 on June 8th, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Accountability Commission Subcommittee on Broader Systems. If the Spanish language interpreters Lizette and Ariel can please give us information on Spanish language interpretation.
Ok. Esta es una reunión pública sujeta a la ley del Estado de Oregon y las normas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y se grabará. Tendremos interpretación en español para esta reunión. Cuando acceda a la interpretación en español, verá la transmisión de video de los oradores, pero la transmisión de audio será reemplazada por el intérprete. Para acceder a este servicio, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas en los controles de la reunión de Zoom en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione Español.
Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Mary. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed caption is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. Please note that this is an automatic captioning service and it isn't always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to public meetings notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation in other languages. This meeting is a public meeting and is subject to City of Portland's Administrative Code and Oregon State law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using the Zoom's Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting them through the Q&A. We hope you use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of the screen. At this time, I'd ask the co-chairs to do the PAC land acknowledgement. Are any co-chairs visible? I cannot see. Okay.
Happy to jump in while we wait
Thank
for
you.
Co-Chair Casey to
Come back on. Yeah, he's
So-
here and on. Yeah.
Yeah, we acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past in working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters.
Thank you, staff. We will now go over the community agreements. There are 3 pages of these agreements, so please take a moment to read them. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. If you notice that our conversation is coming to close to violating a community agreement, please call your fellow commissioner member and gently with compassion. If you are called in, please take a moment to consider how you can best participate in this space while still respecting community agreements and making space for everyone. Do we commit to the following community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in colleagues and collaborators? Please show of hands. Wonderful. Thank you. And I suppose that I'll pass it over to staff to talk about the timeline.
Yeah, just filling in until co-chairs get back, but little connection issue there. So yeah, we'll now talk about the timeline. The Police Accountability Commission has split its work into 6 phases of work. It is now in the 5th phase of work, which is transition plan and broader system. The commission will work until the end of August 2023. And after that, we'll present its proposals to the City Council for their consideration and approval. This slide shows, or next slide, please. This slide shows the outcome documents for the transition plan and broader system phase based upon the agenda and scope approved by the commission. Now that the PAC has in previous phases developed a rough draft of what the new accountability and oversight system will look like, in this phase, the PAC will develop a transition plan for how to get from here to there, as well as an understanding of how the process of implementing the new system will change other police oversight systems and how the new system will interact with other levels of government, and also will name the new oversight board and bureau. This subcommittee is that middle section on the broader system. This slide is the current project plan for the transition plan and broader system phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase. Today's meeting falls into the gold boxes with the purple border located in the lower middle portion of the screen. And following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the PAC. We'd like to highlight that this subcommittee meets next Tuesday, the 13th at 7 p.m. The other subcommittee, the Subcommittee on Transition Plan, meets next Monday, June 12th at 6:30 p.m. And the next full commission meeting is Thursday, June 15th, which is next Thursday, a week from today. And that will include a briefing with the Portland Police Commanding Officers Association, which is a collective bargaining unit representing lieutenants in the Portland Police Bureau. And just a quick overview of today's meeting. Let me start by saying that today's meeting may end a little early because the subcommittee is meeting next Tuesday. Much of today will be spent reviewing and planning for how to get a full and complete document that's a draft for next week. Today, the subcommittee will discuss the new outline, which will eventually become the draft areas of agreement by next Tuesday. And that includes updates from drafting groups. We may also jump around the document a little bit. There are items that the subcommittee may discuss, other items that will be flagged for further discussion, and all of that will shape the co-chair's creation of the draft areas of agreement, which will hopefully be ready for complete discussion next Tuesday. Following all of that, there'll be next steps and public comment.
Thank you, staff. At this point, we will now hear from the drafting groups on their tasks from the last meeting on 5:30. We're just looking for a short 1-minute summary of your work as a group. I guess I will start with group 1, which would be like Commissioner Tirsa.
Hello, 1 second. I'm gathering my notes. I didn't think I was gonna go first, but okay. So the first one was the county, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Um,
If you need me to, I can go to the next group and come back to you.
I have my notes ready.
Okay.
Okay, so I have, let's see, and some of these things may have been mentioned previously, but related to the county, how the oversight board will relate to the county. So the board will be able or can refer cases to the district attorney if or when allegations of possible criminal activity is made by a police officer. And then I also have that so for enforcement of a subpoena or if needed to impose the penalties for not obeying a subpoena, those will be filed with Multnomah County Courthouse. And then lastly, I have let's see. Oh, and just having access to court records or Oregon electronic court case information access for board members. And those are the three that I have right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. Commissioner Cameron or Commissioner Sophia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I did draft a really rough draft document about the working with the state or coordination with the broader system of the state. Let's see, I'll pull up my document really quick, just a second. All right, there we go. And what I did initially is I went to the state the state website rather, and I just looked at the different state agencies, and I came up with some that I thought may be important. So I'll list those. One is the Oregon State Police. The Oregon Advocacy Commission Office, and that includes the Commission on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs, Black Affairs, Hispanic Affairs, and Women. The Oregon State Archives, the Bar Association, Commission for the Blind, which I should have included in the other one up there. The Office of Chief Operating Officer, State Audit Division, Department of Administrative Services, Oregon Council on Court Procedures, Oregon Court of Appeals, Criminal Justice Commission, as well as Employment Relations Board, Government Ethics and Commission, Governor of Oregon, Justice Department of Oregon, Oregon State Legislature, Medical State Examiner's Office, the Psychiatric and Security Review Board, Public Defense Service, and Public Safety and Standards, as well as some items with the Supreme Court. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. Did you want to add anything, Commissioner Cameron?
No, Commissioner Sophia's covered everything that I could even imagine, but thank you for that.
Okay. All right. Then I guess I'm coming back to you, Commissioner Tirsa, because I'm not seeing Commissioner Casey.
And then this is for how the board relates to the federal law, correct?
Yes.
So I have and then I think some of these, so I was trying to go through the settlement agreement. And some of the parts that stood out to me are that there are measures that should be met per the settlement agreement. And those three measures should be met by the city. And so my question was if that also means the new oversight board. But if it does, that will mean the first measure is that the city has changed its procedures and taken actions listed in agreement. The second one, that community trust and PPP has increased, and then sustainable, and that the third one is that there has been sustainable improvements to the existing system. And then another something else that stood out that could possibly relate to the new oversight board. And this is also a question that more like a legal question that I do have. It's relating to the compliance officer community liaison. So these COCLs, they will lead semi-annual assessments. And so my question was also if that includes that, well, they will lead these assessments to measure whether the city whether the new system that the city imposes is meeting these measures. And so my question was if that means also that the new oversight board will be part of these assessments. Those are the two that I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. Staff.
Yeah, I think some of those questions may be able to be answered by Deputy City Attorney Sarah Ames, who is here. Is this a good time to do that, Aimide, or should we wait a second?
I was gonna check in with Commissioner Casey if they had anything, but I would say yes otherwise.
Still working through my technical difficulties, so I'm not caught up yet, but I will chime in when I am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, City Attorney Sarah Ames, you're up.
Hi, Sarah Ames, she, her pronouns, Deputy City Attorney. I just wanted to say that yes, the Community Oversight Board, whatever you end up naming it, will be a city agency staffed by city employees and will be subject to the terms of the settlement agreement. Very specifically, you are tasked with proposing not only code changes to the Portland City Code, but you may also propose amendments to the settlement agreement that reflect the new board that you guys are creating. So if you look particularly at Section 8 of the settlement agreement, it's all about police accountability, and the process has a whole section about police review boards, which will be replaced by your system. But some of the processes, like right now there's a provision, I think it's paragraph 132 or something, that says The police review board, when it gets a case, can send it back to the investigator if they think they need more information. That might be something that your community oversight board panels might want to do. So there's some things, there's a 180-day timeline that can be told for criminal investigation, but there's a timeline by which they're expected to have investigations done and concluded and the discipline decided or the findings made. So there are certain things that are standards applied to the current system that will be, that could be adopted with some modifications, obviously, to fit your new structure. So that's something for you all to think about and propose. The other piece that I think Commissioner Tirsa brought up was that there are outcome assessments that are required at the COCL, and some of those outcome assessments measure aspects of the current accountability system. Those might also need some amendment in your new structure, but a lot of them probably don't. So that's another area for you to look at in terms of the federal settlement agreement, which does govern the new oversight board as well as the current IA-IPR system. So that's about all I wanted to say. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Okay. Since we are still waiting for Commissioner Casey's internet to settle down, we'll move to Commissioner Iona and Sophia, Commissioner Sophia, on other advisory groups related to the police and policing.
So this is Commissioner Iona, she, her. I had time to do some research on that and can give you a recap. So there are some advisory groups that are associated with the Portland Police Bureau, starting with the Police Bureau-wide Advisory Committee, otherwise known as the PAC. This is something that's common in city government. Different bureaus have bureau advisory committees. So this one provides, advises the bureau leadership on issues related to policing and provides input on budget development plans, long-term plans and projects, provides feedback on community priorities. This next one is the Police Equity Advisory Council, which their job is to keep track of and hold the Bureau accountable for achieving the objectives in the Bureau's racial equity plan. Then there's a set of advisory groups that are under the umbrella of this thing called the Coalition of Advisory Groups. People, when they have the Coalition Advisory Group meetings, those meetings are only open to members of the public, outside the advisory group by invitation. And they say on their website, they say that decisions and statements are posted on their website, but I didn't find any. But really specific advisory councils, the African American Advisory Council, the Alliance for Safer Communities Advisory Council, which according to a March article in Willamette Week, the group is on hiatus. The Asian and Pacific Islander American Advisory Council, Latino Advisory Council, Muslim Advisory Council, and the Slavic Advisory Council. So these are all independent, self-organized bodies. And again, their meetings are not open to the public if the group chooses it to be that way. Then there are also two Bureau Operational Advisory Councils. And one is called the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee. That's mentioned in the settlement agreement under Section 6, Crisis Intervention. And then there's the Training Advisory Council, which their mission is to provide ongoing advice to the Chief of Police and the Training Division in order to continually improve training standards, practices, and outcomes So they are also mentioned in the settlement agreement, paragraphs 86 and 87. So these two groups hold public meetings. The Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee meetings are only open to the public on occasion. TAC meetings seem to always be open to the public, and they post their minutes. The BHUAC also posts their minutes. Then, so those are the ones that are really specifically tied and under the purview of the Police Bureau. So then there are three police-related committees that are housed outside the Portland Police Bureau. And the first is the Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group. And the Bureau's Focused Intervention Team is made up of police officers and led by a captain, lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and there are 12 officers. And they are responsible for addressing gun violence and the proliferation of weapons in the city. So then there's this community oversight group that provides advice and guidance to them. They started their work in June 2021. And so they assist with recommendations to reduce gun violence through prevention, intervention, and response. Then the next one is the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. It's a group of 13 community members, independent from the city and the Portland Police Bureau. Its work includes independent assessment of the implementation of the DOJ settlement agreement and gathering input and exchanging information about PPB policies and practices. Their full committee and subcommittee meetings are, sorry, I lost whenever you do that, it kicks me off my Word document. Let's see, their full committee and subcommittee meetings are open to the public, and they, sorry. And they encourage community participation. So they have the authority to make recommendations to the Police Bureau and City Council with a response from the city required. And that's, this is discussed in the section 9 of the settlement agreement. And then the last thing is the Citizen Review Committee, which is the 11-member committee created in 2001, and it's associated with independent police review. And I think we're all pretty familiar with them. So, and those members are appointed by City Council. So that's the results of the research I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Staff?
Thanks.
Yeah, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Internet issues a little slow over here too. So just wanted to clarify, we've confirmed to date that the Alliance for Safer Communities, with one of their former chairs, confirmed that it is disbanded. And then also wanted to flag with relation to PSEP that the city is obligated to provide a response, and the main difference there is that can be a response from the mayor's office, for the mayor, I guess, as an individual, and then which is different from the charter protected situation with relation to a recommendation from the oversight board. And I think Deputy City Attorney Ames can talk about that. And then I have one other note after that.
Thank you. City Attorney Sarah Ames, go ahead.
Hi, Debbie gave a great rundown of the various advisory groups that that relate to policing. They don't all advise the police directly, but I just wanted to note again, as she said, section 9, which is the community engagement and the creation of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, is a section of the settlement agreement. The Training Advisory Council also is created as a remedy under the settlement agreement, and it is subject to public meetings law. It has to have open meetings by agreement in the settlement agreement. The Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee also was created through the settlement agreement, and that one is not required to have open meetings. They've discussed it several times, and they have quarterly public meetings to discuss their work. So those 3 committees, PSEP, the BHUAC and the Training Advisory Council all are in the settlement agreement, and any changes you make to their structure or how they relate to the Community Oversight Board would also have to be reflected probably in amendments to the settlement agreement. So that's another area beyond the accountability section where you might be proposing changes to the settlement agreement, which would then have to be approved by DOJ, well, approved by the city to go to DOJ and to the court for approval as amendments to the settlement agreement. So that's just another thing to keep in mind as you think about the transition.
And the other thing to add is that co-chair KC also sent in some text related to this, which I think we'll get into both sections of that as we get through it. But it's less, everything that Commissioner Debbie mentioned is down in the reference information section. And then there's some separate texts that will probably need to be as a group flagged for further discussion today when we get to that document. Just because there's some places where those contradict, and there's some information that will hopefully be received by Tuesday that can help with this, some information coming. So yeah, pass it back over to Aimee.
Thank you, staff. And then we have one other group, which is other city agencies, which was Commissioner Christian. You're here. Do you have any updates or rundown for us?
Yeah, definitely. As far as I can tell, in the other agencies category, internal affairs is the biggest and possibly the only one. So that's one I've been focusing on. I have I sent a drafted proposed text for the relationship between the board to co-chairs. Brief overview is basically that I think we should actually talk to them before we make any decisions. We're going to be doing a lot of their work, so I feel like naturally it would make sense to sunset IA. But looking back at our first briefing with them, there was some benefit to having IA, and I suggested in the text that we transfer the leftover responsibilities, which would be things that don't actually relate to the community, cases that don't actually relate to the community that are more internal to human resources, but I don't know if they have the capacity to do that. So there's some text, the text basically leaves space to keep IA around in a more limited capacity to just take care of internal affair stuff. It just depends on if there's capacity for it to be transferred to human resources or not, or the Bureau of Human Resources or not, which I couldn't find much information on. So I'm going to recommend answers to that question, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. Staff, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag that of all the required briefings and consultations that are required of the Police Accountability Commission by the City Council, the one that hasn't yet been done is the Bureau of Human Resources. And that's in large part because early on, can't remember which phase, co-chair said we're going to need to talk to them after we have something to talk to them about with relation to staff and all of that. So that is coming up. Just working on getting that scheduled. And the best way to do that is yet to be determined, but it's happening. There's also a lot of other briefers that are not technically required, but that you've all brought up, which are also being scheduled. And so, for example, the previously mentioned during the intro information, the Portland Police Commanding and Officers Association is not explicitly required by council. It's something that members wanted to hear from them and talk to them. And so that's been scheduled for the full commission. So there are other briefers coming up, but just wanted to flag that the Bureau of Human Resources is coming up. Not sure when yet, but thank you.
Thank you, staff. All right. If there isn't anything else, if Commissioner Casey, I wasn't sure if you wanted to speak at all, because I know your internet's been acting awkward. Okay, so I guess we'll take a break And then we'll go into the updates on the outlines when we get back for a break. So I'll have us, we'll do a 15-minute break. So we'll come back at 8. Now back from our break. So if we could have the slides up, please. And we'll ask the staff and co-chairs will now walk through the outline of the eventual draft of areas of agreement on broader systems.
So, Co-Chair Casey, are you here? Or would you like me to get started? Yeah.
Let's get started.
Yeah, go ahead, staff.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's hard to hear him.
Yeah, I was just making sure. So yeah, so we're gonna do a quick walkthrough of the document. The co-chairs and staff worked together to incorporate some of the text suggestions from drafting groups and got the headers figured out, at least mostly. Also, some of the reference information has been added below. So there may be text that was submitted that isn't in the upper portion of the document, but is down below. For example, a lot of the information that Commissioner Debbie walked through on the advisory groups that isn't necessarily a proposal, but is related to their work and what they do is down below in the reference information. We'll show that as we go. Again, today's more of a light review designed to figure out what needs to be discussed further and what needs to be prepped in advance of the meeting of this subcommittee next Tuesday. So you can see the table of contents on the screen right now. It includes a larger section on city government, and then a section on county, state, and federal government. And the recommendations is something related to the settlement agreement, which might follow along from what Deputy City Attorney Ames had brought up about possibly needing to make adjustments to the settlement agreement to allow for some of the other changes. So yeah. So there's a couple. Let's start with A1 here. There's a few points not yet in sentence form. That's just a general overview of the city's relationship, or the relationship between the oversight board and the rest of city government, which also follows along pretty well from what Deputy City Attorney Ames was talking about. There, that'll be by next week converted into text from what I understand from co-chairs. There is the impact of oversight board implementation on city advisory entities. A through D is from we got 2 different versions of text, and so this entire section can be considered flagged for further discussion as the drafting groups need to kind of work that together and hopefully get some sort of answer to it. But A through D is from one source and E is from the other. And there's a couple of things that aren't in either. So talking about transferring responsibilities, and this list could change. This is just, again, first time it's being looked at by members at all. Subcommittees of the board and how those would be comprised. Members of other groups that may or may not end up being affected in some way, being able to join the oversight groups, the oversight board, and then which groups are not being transferred in any way. And then for those that are not being that are not affected in any way, they would be the oversight board would meet periodically, regularly with each of them to coordinate and to understand what's going on policy wise in those particular groups. So again, flag for further discussion, probably, and we'll do a walkthrough where members can comment in just a few minutes. A3 is related to other city staff entities, bulk of which is the internal affairs. This is what Commissioner Christian talked about. There were a couple of notes, 3 other notes related to other parts of PPB that haven't yet been built out that are items for discussion later today. Relationship with county government. So there is a question that maybe might benefit from both commissioner conversation and from some clarity from Deputy City Attorney Ames on this about how Washington and Clackamas counties fit into this, because there are portions of the city of Portland that are in each of those two counties. The bulk of it is in Multnomah. And so most of this was written for Multnomah. There's the points for the district attorney, oversight to oversight relationships, which is about working with oversight of the MCSO, not directly conducting that oversight. And then other county relationships, which include, as mentioned, the medical examiner's office and the local public safety coordinating council. And you can see a lot of comments over here related to your prior discussion on that. Then there's a conversation about state government. These first 5 lines are related to items that have been discussed in the past and just noted here to build out for the future. And then after that, and we'll probably ask Commissioner Sophia to walk through this a little bit more. There's a lot of information here from that drafting group that relate to some of this has been talked about earlier today, but related to the state government. Talk about this in just a couple of minutes here. And then on the federal government side, these are all notes from last time. Nothing has changed since the last meeting on May 30th in this section. And then the last section here, co-chair KC drafted a potential recommendation to change the settlement agreement. And it's in red line version. So the text that is not showing a track change is what it already is. And there's a little information here as well, just explaining it. So a question here to clarify with the DOJ, and then 2 changes to the text. I'll just show this for a second so folks can read it, and then keep scrolling in just a moment here. All right. And then there's the reference information. So this first section is everything that co-chair Debbie put together. Thank you so much for that. I should note that there is some fact finding going on and engagement with some of the other advisory groups too. So the goal is that by next Tuesday, there's at least an understanding of what information exists out there and more information to help on this side of the document. See these. Should also note that there are currently 4 police-related committees housed outside the PPB. The one that isn't listed here is the Police Accountability Commission itself, which we know is going away. So just wanted to mention that for anyone who may be curious watching at home. And then the remaining parts after that were all there previously. So I'm not going to walk through this in too much detail, but we may scroll down to it as we're talking about earlier parts of the document. Just because it may be relevant. So these are the places in the barriers document that relate to other layers of government. Barriers and best practices document. This is the sections in access to information that relate to other layers of government, from officer accountability, structural oversight, and you can see as it goes how there's a few things in a couple of these and a lot in several others. And then these are the assignments from before for who was on what drafting group. So you're all familiar with that. So that's the like brief walkthrough of it. As you can see, it is not yet a draft areas of agreement. It's an outline, and there's some information that's being put in. Talking to co-chairs a little earlier today and yesterday, the intention is to kind of take all the work that the drafting committees have done and ensure that everything's organized and ready by next Tuesday to be a draft areas of agreement that this subcommittee can walk through and have those conversations where you're deciding on text and things like that. What remains to happen from now until then is to have a conversation about some of these sections today and get some guidance for the co-chairs and for the drafting groups. And then also for the drafting groups that don't yet have text, like proposed text, you can see on the, for example, the federal side is still pretty, it's not fully in sentence form. Same thing on the state side, although there's a lot of notes here and a lot of work's been done in all these cases. Same thing on the county side, whereas for some of the others, there is text. So I think this is a good place to stop the walkthrough and kind of pass it back over to talk about, like, actually start the conversation.
Thank you, staff. So we'll just go into the discussion right away. Thank you for the walkthrough. We ask you to follow normal discussion rules. Please be brief with each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated. Remember, I will be using a weighted stack today in our discussion. Finally, be forward-looking in your comments. Okay, today we'll be focusing on flagging items for further discussion rather than text changes. And next Tuesday, we will focus on text changes as staff has noted. Okay, who would like to go first? I would normally call on the co-chair, but I don't think this internet is acting up yet or is acting right yet. So I'm just checking. Commissioner Casey. Staff.
Yeah, for A1, there hasn't yet been a conversation about this portion. This is related to what Deputy City Attorney Ames mentioned, and these are things that have come out of previous documents. So as well, Independent Bureau was just something that is part of the areas of agreement on oversight staff. Independent judgment is in the charter, as is the fact that it's part of city government. And although it's not explicitly written, subject to HR rules and other administrative regulations, are there any other things that might be helpful to include in this that or not include in this that is sort of a general description before getting into the details of how it impacts or how implementation might change parts of the system that currently exists?
I'm not seeing anybody.
It's perfect just the way it is. All right. So we'll just mention again this second section. And again, it's the drafting group probably will have some time to talk between now and next Tuesday. But this is sort of the initial reference. And then again, there is all the descriptions of the groups are down below. And yeah, initial thoughts might be helpful, and also just kind of noting this is all going to be flagged for further discussion.
Commissioner Iona, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I definitely would like to talk about this more. As I've thought about this, think that the oversight board, it really needs to focus on police accountability and particularly the cases that come in because of community complaints. And if based on some of the sort of theoretical projections that have made, it seems like they're probably going to have their hands full with that. So, like, for example, like I do attend half of the training advisory council meetings every year, and they just feel like such a connected to the police bureau itself, the training division. I guess I don't know if I see the benefit to putting them, making the oversight board have to worry about them. And same with I sort of feel like the community oversight group that's attached to the focused intervention team. I mean, that's a whole team of police officers who are, dealing with gun violence. And then we have this community group that's supposed to help them, make decisions that are, that the community supports. And so, yeah, so that's just my musings right now that I'd like to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Commissioner Casey, or Co-Chair Casey.
So I just wanted to, I think that there's a discussion to be had with regards to like each individual group about how well it fits or doesn't fit into the work of the oversight board. But I do want to flag that I think in addition to sort of the efficiency argument on the side of the people doing the work, there's also sort of a simplicity argument for community members to folding some of this work into the oversight board. Because for instance, if I'm a community member who's had a bad experience with the focused intervention team and either has a complaint to file against them or potentially has a policy sort of change that I would like to see, I think currently our system is kind of confusing with regards to like, do I go talk to the PSEP? Do I talk to the FitCog? And now we're going to be adding another group on top of that who actually has the power to address those complaints. But I don't want to put us in a situation where the person's coming and saying, I have an issue with the focused intervention team, and they're hearing, well, for your individual complaint, you need to talk to this group. For your policy complaints, you need to talk to this other group. If you want to recommend any changes, there's another group. I just think it would be nice from the perspective of the public to consolidate some of those functions.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey. Commissioner Glenn, and then Commissioner Iona, and then we'll move on.
Excuse me. Yes, I just been listening to the comments so far, and I can see the points from each side. At this point, for me in particular, I know I'm on that subcommittee, and I'm assuming that other people are in a similar position, that I really want to take some time to look at these different groups and what they do. And, I don't want us to make things more confusing by having all of these separate groups. But looking at what they do, making sure that I would say include them in the new board, if it fits within that realm, just to minimize some of the issues that Commissioner Casey brought up. I could see that being a big problem. But I just personally, I want to spend more time on it because I don't know these individual groups that well. And I just want to study them a little further, see how well they work in the new system. And just knowing what they do is going to be very helpful to help me make those decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. So before calling on Commissioner Iona, I just wanted to state that this is flagged for further discussion. So after Commissioner Iona's statement, we will be moving on to the next section, just so we can keep the meeting moving. Thank you. Commissioner Iona.
So to follow up with Commissioner Glenn's comment, I'd suggest that you, Commissioner Glenn and others, that, some of these, I don't think the COG does, but PCCP and TAC both have their meetings on video. And I think they've got minutes posted and everything. I just feel like when I watch them, they are doing a lot of, they spend a lot of time and do a lot of work. And again, I'm thinking about our oversight board, and when we think of the hours they're going to be spending having hearings on all these different investigations, I just sort of feel like layering the responsibility of attending trainings and giving feedback to the police bureau and looking at policies on this and that and writing up reports. And then PCCP has done all sorts of work on, they recently did stuff on the shot spotter and on the whether there's going to be a, what do they call it, a court monitor. And so they've done a whole lot, had community discussions and written reports and all that. Again, I just am worried about the workload. The one thing in recognition of that, when I sent in my little memo, I suggested that these groups have regular meetings with a couple of representatives from each one, so they can talk about what kind of common things that they're running across in their work, and then sort of unify forces on like policy work and stuff like that. So that was sort of a way to bridge what goes on among the groups, so they're not working on parallel tracks. Okay, enough for now. Sorry, since I did the work on this, I obviously am interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. So we'll now go on to section A3. And again, this section, the last section is flagged for further discussion, so you will be having more conversations on this.
So yeah, A3, and there are two parts to this. One relates to what Commissioner Christian talked about earlier. So related to internal affairs, the board will take over a large majority of the investigations that internal affairs currently conducts, except for cases that do not impact community members at all, or cases involving officers who don't explicitly wish to have the board investigate their complaint. That relates to previous decisions of the PAC. I may continue to operate following the creation of the board in a smaller capacity to continue taking on these cases if necessary. However, if possible, this work shall be transferred to the Bureau of Human Resources or equivalent agency, and IA will sunset following the creation of the board. And it looks like this might not be able to be fully resolved if the Bureau of Human Resources part of that is a piece of information that the subcommittee may want to know first. But that part is drafted. There are a couple other things just below that. It might make sense to quickly pause here. So this is already flagged for further discussion too. This is the second of two things flagged for further discussion, but if there's anything that needs to be said now. Sorry, I read that a little bit fast. I'm aware of that. Okay, so looks like the next part, there were two items that were flagged and then a third one that was in a comment from the last meeting. When we get to that third one, I'm going to ask if Co-Chair KC can give some more information on that. The first two related to the Professional Standards Division, which is the part of the Police Bureau in which internal affairs is one part of it. It's not all of it, it's just one part of it. And so the note here that was referenced in a previous meeting was that collaboration between the other portions, including standards and accountability. And there's sort of a record that has each individual officer's sort of performance record on conduct issues, at least, might be relevant to engage with if the subcommittee or the PAC wants the oversight board to engage with them. And then separately in the transition plan subcommittee, just a reference here that the PRB coordinator, police review board coordinator, in the immediate post-transition phase is something that they started to talk about a little bit in comments, and maybe we can learn a little bit more about that between now and the next meeting, because that wasn't fully discussed at the subcommittee on transition plan yet, but it might be next Monday in advance of next Tuesday's meeting of this subcommittee. And then the other item was the Inspector General. During the Oversight Staff Subcommittee, there was a conversation about creating a staff position at the Oversight Bureau that would possibly be called the Auditor, possibly a Monitor, and possibly an Inspector General. And separately, there is a position, a city position, an elected official called the Auditor. There may be an independent monitor for the settlement agreement, and there may also be, or there is a staff position at PPB called the Inspector General. So there was a conversation about if anything related to that should be brought up, and that was placed into the garden plot for this subcommittee. So we flagged that there. And then finally, there's a potential oversight board. This is a comment made at the last meeting that hopefully Co-Chair KC can add some information on. Potential oversight board liaison role to other levels of government. And there's a comment that you can see on the side here.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Casey?
Sorry, I'm on, but I'm unable to read the comments. So if somebody would be able to read it to me, then I'd be happy to comment further.
Okay, let's see what I got here.
Yeah, it's independent counsel may be best to communicate to DOJ. However, city attorney's office is conduit to DOJ. And as the oversight board is part of the city, it's a party to the lawsuit represented by the city attorney's office. May be best for city attorney's office, DOJ, and board's counsel to work this out later.
Yeah, I think that is probably, there are a lot of kind of weird, esoteric legal ethics and just sort of litigation logistics issues implicated in having the oversight board be communicating directly with DOJ when DOJ is representing a party that is adverse to the city in a lawsuit. And so I don't know that that's something that we will be able to work out in this document, or that we should. I think that is something that we are basically going to have to say, like, the independent counsel for the police review board will work with the city attorney's office to determine how best the review board can engage with the city and the Department of Justice in the case and in the management of the settlement agreement. Because we don't want anybody getting crosswise with anybody else over legal and ethical obligations.
Thank you, Co-Chair Casey. I believe Deputy Sarah Ames has Deputy City Attorney Sarah Ames has a comment.
Hi, thank you for calling on me. I just wanted to clarify, it is complicated and there are a lot of different issues around conflicts and all that. But as far as communicating with a represented individual, the DOJ city settlement agreement provides that DOJ shall have direct access to city employees. And I think that was, and they do call up and talk to non-CAO staff regularly. I mean, in fact, they need to monitor the police bureau. So that provision is in there, I think, specifically to get around some of the concerns about the ethical rule about communicating with a represented client as a lawyer. You know, your opposing counsel's client, you aren't supposed to talk to them. But that is not to say that this isn't a complicated issue, and there are relationships between all of the different parties to work out. But that was just one that I thought I should flag. The DOJ does get to talk to IPR director Ross Caldwell, you know, without a city attorney being present, for example.
Thank you. Staff?
Yeah, I have a clarification question for the city attorney here. Just to clarify from the last comment that ability to speak directly to police bureau employees is a part of the Department of Justice's monitoring function as it relates to compliance with the settlement agreement or compliance assessments of the settlement agreement. Is that correct?
That is written into the settlement agreement, and they are both plaintiff and monitor in the current settlement agreement. If we do switch to an independent monitor, there will be a provision that will define their access. But I expect them to be able to continue to contact city employees without a city attorney present. That doesn't mean that if somebody wants a city attorney's office represented in the meeting when they meet with the Department of Justice, they can call on us, but that's not a requirement. The DOJ can access them directly.
Well, you answered the follow-up question too, so thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. So I believe what is the next section? Okay, section B.
Okay. So section B, section A was all about the city government, moving on to the county government. And you may see a little bit of track changes, but it's just reorganizing for the most part, except for that very first part. So first, the district attorney, referral of criminal cases, the need to collaborate or to keep information separate, including compelled testimony, which cannot be used in a criminal investigation, but can be used in a administrative investigation. Enforcement of subpoenas as access to court records and case information. Those are both just mentioned by Commissioner Tirsa. And then the DA is also an entity to appeal to for public records and confidentiality. Oversight relationship, working relationship with oversight over Multnomah County Sheriff's Office or corrections due to the need to get information about joint police operations or police activity with relation to the jail that's run by the county. And then although this isn't built out yet, there are comments that may relate to having a relationship or access to information to and from the medical examiner's office and the local public safety coordinating council. So this one, because it's not as built out, this section, it might be helpful if there are things that members would like to see or not see in it to hear that so that co-chairs have that information in advance of next week.
Any comments or questions?
And then there was a question raised regarding Washington counties and Washington County and Clackamas County. And this might also be a legal question around what the necessary relationship is, if any, with those counties. And then separately, if the desired relationship, which is more of what the subcommittee members, if you have thoughts on what the desired relationship might be with those counties, if any.
Commissioner Iona.
So I just on the, I don't know how much time we should spend worrying about this, but on the, that I know that there's some fuzzy boundaries around the edges of Multnomah County and the city of Portland and all that. But I'm assuming that there's a pretty clear line between where the Portland Police Bureau has jurisdiction as far as enforcing the law and other police agencies or sheriffs are in charge. And it sort of feels like if that's already been settled, maybe we don't have to worry too much about that sort of kind of funny overlap around the edges. But I'm just guessing here. I just was trying to think of maybe we didn't have to spend a lot of time worrying about that particular situation.
I see City Attorney Sarah Ames has their hand up. Maybe we can answer your question.
Hi, thank you. The primary, in my experience, and I am not living this day to day with the internal affairs, for example, and IPR, but my understanding is the primary times I've heard the county or counties brought up are one, when there is an officer involved shooting, it always goes to the DA of the county where the shooting took place, which has been Multnomah County universally, as far as I know. And that, and they have to take it to the grand jury or decide not to take it to a grand jury and get a no true bill. Anyway, they have to clear that hurdle about whether there's going to be a criminal prosecution before they can resume the administrative investigation as to whether the use of the lethal, the deadly weapon shooting usually involved a violation of policy or should be disciplined. So that is the primary area where I've heard of the relationship with the district attorney and the county. That is a little bit dicey. They like to check on how it's going, but they don't want to interfere in a criminal investigation. So it's a bit of a hands-off, but check in. The other time, and I wish, you know, it were so clear that crime stopped at one boundary and didn't go into the other, but there have been situations where, for example, there was an officer involved shooting on 205, if you recall, and they chased the suspect up the highway, you know, and it ended with a shooting by Clackamas County. However, because it became into the city of Portland, then there was a Portland police officer who was there and who deployed a 40 millimeter, they kind of phone tip ballistics that they, this officer shot that 40 millimeter at this suspect just after he had been shot. Anyway, it was a whole thing. And so that needed to be investigated as, you know, for the use of their weapon or their involvement in. So it kind of, you know, can get a little bit tricky sometimes, but I think the fact is that you, the Community Oversight Board, will be responsible for the administrative, not criminal investigations of Portland Police Bureau members, sworn officers. And so just if they chase someone down into Clackamas County, they're still on the job for Portland Police, and they're still supposed to follow all the policies that we have, including the use of force policy. So that's, I hope that's helpful at all. It's, I have not heard of any incidents or complaints coming in from incidents that took place in those little pockets on the edge of the city that are in Clackamas and Washington County, but it could happen. So that's about what I know.
Thank you. Commissioner Iona, you want to answer back?
So I was just going to follow up. So it does help to understand, though, based on what City Attorney Ames said, that if you're a Portland police officer, even if you cross the line into somebody else's jurisdiction, you're still accountable to our oversight system that attached to your job and the city of Portland. So I think that helps. That clears things up for me a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the rest of the commission? Commissioner Glenn.
I just wanted to say I believe that these counties and state police and sheriff's offices have some agreements where they're bound to do what. Now what they can do and what they can't do and what they have to do if they cross lines. So I do know that there are some agreements out there between those different agencies on those things, but I'm not sure if, you know, how much we need to get into that, but I do know that they've already kind of sort of tried to hammer that out between themselves in some way. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. If there isn't anything else, we can move on to the next section.
Okay, so the next section is state government. Prior to this, prior to this version of the update from the drafting group, there were 5 items in here. There's the obligation to follow state rules, which as of July 1st, 2025 will include the discipline guide. Currently, there's a discipline guide that is included in the collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Portland Police Association. Upon the expiration of that, the then current, which is likely to be updated in late 2024, statewide discipline guide will apply. So that's when that takes effect. And then the ability to contribute to state lawmaking and policymaking processes on subject and provide subject matter expertise and also receive it, which in particular relates to collective bargaining process, which is governed under state law, and the Law Enforcement Standards Commission, which is the commission that creates that discipline guide. And then, although this wasn't discussed in this subcommittee, arbitration has come up several times at the full commission, and in other prior phases of work as something which may be of interest to the oversight board in the future, and wanted to kind of hear from members as to how that works in a moment. But first, going to pass it over to Commissioner Sophia to talk about the remainder of this section, and you can let us know if you want us to scroll around, because I know there's some scrolling to do.
All right, thank you so much. Just an overview of what I did is I because I don't know all the agencies, it's related to the state. I went to the state's website and looked at all the different agencies and organizations that I thought may be related to interactions with the board. So it's a big broad sweep, and some of them are including some of the items that we discussed. But what I'm thinking here is that I'm thinking that it might be good to mirror some of the state and city and county organizations and make sure we have that covered on local, county, state, and federal. So if the group wants to look at some of these and discuss them, that's fine. I took some cut and paste certain things off the website just because I wanted to have more clarification of what that state entity did. So that was just for my knowledge, and so I can see whether it really relates to something that we need to coordinate with or not. So right now, my goal, and I'll be working with Commissioner Cameron on this, is trying to focus on making sure we get the state level, I call it counterparts of the city and county is related to that, and also include some other things. I do know if you scroll back to the top, the collective bargaining is not spelled out, but I do have the one of the divisions that handles that. I didn't specifically see arbitration, but I do believe that that's covered in one of the agencies. And the Law Enforcement Standards Commission is included in one of those as well. So if you would like to scroll through, if someone has any questions or comments on some of the items there, please make some comments. This is just a quick, brief stab at things that could possibly be related, but not necessarily. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. And again, if there are any questions or comments, please don't hesitate. Anything that may need to be flagged or you're curious about. If there are no other comments for this particular section, I just wanted to do a time check at 8:44, so a little over 15 minutes, so we can go on to the next section.
Hi, thank you. So the next section is section D, the relationship with the federal government. So some things to consider are the DOJ support for independent judgment. Sorry, the PAC process and oversight board creation subject to the settlement agreement directly, found in paragraph 195 of the settlement agreement. The oversight board may end up taking on accountability functions, which are remedies in the settlement agreement, and therefore might be obligated to fulfill the city's obligations under the agreement. And so because of that, the oversight board is to take over any responsibilities currently tasked under the settlement agreement. The need to propose adjusting the settlement agreement to adjust or reassign those responsibilities might need to be visited. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Any comments or questions? Or anything that would you like to flag for this section for further discussion? Or even the section for further discussion? Okay, I think we can go on to the next section, E.
Great, so and co-chair Casey might be the best person to speak to this. So just wanted to flag that, and hopefully the connection will permit, but this track, yeah, this track change paragraph up at the top here is sort of it's text that was used very similar to the text in the access to information about the body cam recommendations. When it's more of a recommendation than a code change proposal, that's just where that text came from. But the idea, from what we understand from co-chair KC, is to make at least 2 changes to the paragraph 195 as part of the proposal. And I'll just note, based on the content and where in the settlement agreement this might be something that is a better fit for the other current subcommittee, the subcommittee on transition plan, as you can see what it actually relates to. So this might be something that this subcommittee doesn't continue to discuss, but that you all have the chance to discuss in that document when it comes to full commission. So you're all obviously members of the full commission. So yeah, I'll just read it out loud into the record. Within 60 days, well, I'll give it context. Within 18 months of the date this paragraph is entered as an order to the court, the commission shall propose to the city council changes to the city code to create a new police oversight system as reflected in the City of Portland Charter Amendment, establishing a community police oversight board. Within 60 days of receiving the commission's proposal, the city will propose amendments to city code to address the commission's proposal and corresponding amendments to this agreement, subject to the United States and court's approval, to ensure full implementation of the oversight board and effective police accountability consistent with the requirements of this agreement. Within 21 days of the approval of the amendments to the agreement by the United States and the court, the city council shall consider and vote on the conforming city code provisions creating the oversight board. And then the proposed addition, within 60 days of the council's adoption of the city code provisions, the council shall appoint members to the oversight board and provide them with the support and resources they need to conduct a national search for a director. Within 6 months of the council's adoption of the city code provisions, the board shall hire a director and the city shall provide the director with the support and resources they need to hire staff and establish the bureau operating under the direction of the oversight board. And then it continues with within 12 months, the transition period, which is all being discussed in the other subcommittee. The other part of the proposed is to add a new subsection, in proposing changes to city code and amendments to this agreement and in implementing the new oversight board. The city shall not impede or interfere with the independent judgment of the board as defined by the Police Accountability Commission. So that's the proposal. And again, this might be something that feel free to give thoughts on, but it may end up being in the other subcommittees' work after today. So this might be a good chance to do that, or you can wait until it comes, if it comes out of the subcommittee to the full commission.
Thank you, staff. Any comments or questions? Okay. Since there is no comments or questions, I believe the next section is references. Is that what I'm, yeah, reference information?
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. I think then we'll just go to the next steps. I'll pass it over to staff for next steps for the subcommittee of broader systems. Oh, Commissioner Iona, I see your hands up.
Sorry, I just want to get in, asked if in the next steps, could Samir talk about when we're going to get a copy of this? So if we want to, you know, look at it more carefully before our Tuesday meeting, it'd be really great to get it, you know, with enough time to read it. Thanks.
Yeah, so yes to that. First in the chat, we'll put the groups. Many of you have been involved in this type of drafting group in the past and other subcommittees. And obviously many of you have been doing a lot of work here. I think the ideal endpoint of that process is sentences in some sort of structure that can be parts of the areas of agreement document, which looks very similar to all the areas of agreement documents from a formatting perspective in previous phases. So that is still in progress, I know, for several groups. The city groups seem to be a little bit further along in getting towards the two groups related to city things. So number 4 and number 5 related to that. But for the other groups to try and get text that is in a sentence form if possible is sort of the goal. A lot of what's already been done is very helpful as well and will be included in the reference materials, reference information documents. But in terms of that, that's sort of the end point there. And so one thing that may be helpful is if you need any support to check in with the co-chairs, check in with staff. Definitely some have reached out to talk already, and that's good to try and just kind of get whatever resources you may need. The next meeting of this subcommittee is on Tuesday. So in talking to co-chairs, the goal was to try and get a final draft out for that meeting by Sunday, which would mean trying to get by Saturday night at latest any updated text from all of your drafting groups, and to strongly request. I know this is strange coming from me, normally be from a co-chair, but just because Casey's off here, to strongly request that you all take the time to try and chat with your colleagues or colleague in most cases on the drafting group and try to get a single slate of text. For those who have already submitted text, you can revise it too. And then that'll all come together on Saturday night. By Sunday, we'll get that sent back out to you. And then after that, if you're seeing other sections that you have thoughts on, please feel free to propose changes and track changes, just like any other document of the PAC between Sunday and the Tuesday meeting. Any questions on any of that? And to help in that process, we'll send out a copy of the of this document as it currently is tonight as well. So that should help. And then in parallel to all this, there is information being sought from a variety of sources. We talked about several of them today, you know, Bureau of Human Resources, some of the other advisory groups, et cetera. So hopefully we'll have updates on all of that coming as well. And then the last note, although their purpose in discussing in this briefing that I'm about to mention is related to the transition, If you have an interest in hearing from and asking questions to the Citizen Review Committee, which is not necessarily part of this content area because it is known that it is going to be sunsetting. They are briefing the subcommittee on transition plan next Monday evening. That's a meeting Monday the 12th from 6:30 to 9. So if that's of interest to anyone related to a question that you may want to answer related to this subcommittee, it's a possibility. I think that's everything. So I'll pass it back to Amide.
Thank you, staff. We'll now go to public comment. We'll now take public comment on the issues that the PAC is discussing, or community members can tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments and questions to 3 minutes in length, and raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. Okay, let's see. I only see one. Commissioner Dan Handelman.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the commission. I enjoy being able to sit on the sidelines during your meetings. I'm on the other subcommittee. So I don't know if you all saw in the Q&A, I put some information about the internal affairs workload that is printed in the most recent police annual report. Basically, each investigator has about 16 cases a year. So I think given the number of internal cases that have happened in the last several years, that they probably would need 3 people to do the investigations. When I say they, the city broadly, just for something to think about, or perhaps our work group has to think about that. Second of all, I didn't think about this until we were talking about shootings and overlap of jurisdictions, but TriMet is an important thing that the board's going to have to talk to. There was a case that came before the Citizen Review Committee where somebody had an interaction on the TriMet platform, and they could not get the officers involved to talk to the investigators in Portland because they don't work for Portland and their bargaining agreement protects them. So that's another agency to put on that list to think about. Not every incident that happens is run by the Multnomah County District Attorney. In fact, there was a shooting April 24 where 2 Portland police officers and 1 Clackamas officer shot somebody and killed them, and the Clackamas DA is running that investigation right now. Also, I very strongly agree with Commissioner Iona that it doesn't make sense to me, as somebody who goes to all these different meetings, to try to consolidate all these other groups into the new board. I understand the concept of trying to make it so people don't have to go to all these different meetings, but the Citizen Review Committee has a lot of obligations right now that they don't even take on because they're so busy doing other work that they're required to do, such as hearing appeals. And I fear that what we're going to do is give too much to the new board, and they won't take on those roles anymore. With the exception of the CRC and the PRB, we have said that nobody should work on more than 1 oversight body at a time. But because those 2 are sunsetting, I would just want to put it out there that we don't want to think about making an exception to that. I didn't think about this before, but the Inspector General and the PSD put out force audits as part of the DOJ agreement. Is that something we want the analysts at our board to do? Medical examiners, I mentioned last time, are part of the state, not the county. And the settlement agreement items, I don't think that's a good idea to try to amend that, because by the time that those amendments go through, we will have already get to the point where the city council needs to make the amendments to the settlement agreement to accommodate our board. So it's only going to be amended once. I think those are things we should just recommend at best. And the timeline needs to match up with the other subcommittee. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Handelman. And as I don't see any other hands raised at this moment, we will end our public comment and go to the garden plot. I see that co-chairs are not here still. Maybe not. Staff, do you have anything for the garden plot?
Yeah, I think that entire proposed amendment would be a garden plot item for the other subcommittee, just because of its content area, but nothing other than that at present.
Okay. Wonderful. So, okay, well, thank you for your time. As a reminder, you can now submit advanced public comment to Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or post mail. Thank you to all members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you to the interpreters. Finally, thank you to all the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. And if you are not already signed up for email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. Sorry. Okay, just making sure. Right. The next meeting of the subcommittee is Tuesday, June 13th. The next meeting of the full commission is scheduled for Thursday, June 15th. It is now 9 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time. Have a beautiful night.